Jesus is in a pretty difficult position in the gospel today, as he often is. But his difficulty is that he has to try to convince people that he is God. How exactly do you go about doing that? Like, if you had to convince people that you were God, what would you say? And so the people are having difficulty, and Jesus is having difficulty, and the people are saying, "Hey, why don't you just speak plainly?" And Jesus is like, "I did. I told you straightforwardly, and you didn't believe me. And then I did miracles for you, and you didn't believe those. And then I interpreted the scriptures for you, and you're still not believing me." And again, I can kind of sympathize with the people around Jesus too, because Jesus is claiming to be God. I've had people come up to me and claim that they're God before. Has this ever happened to you? You have really interesting conversations when you're walking downtown in your collar. I've had one particular instance was vivid because they came up to me in a really normal way. They said something like, "Praise Jesus," right? Which is that happens to me all the time, and I love it when that happens. And my response is usually just "Amen," and then we both go our separate ways. But this person used it to stop me, and then ran up to me and they started talking to me about fairly normal things, and I was like, okay, very nice, talking about the scriptures and theology and the faith. And then they started to get a little bit more personal, and they started to talk about some supernatural things that were happening in their life. And I was starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable and starting to try to find my way out of this conversation. And finally they just said, "By the way, I think I'm God." And at that point, I said, "Really, really nice to meet you, God." And I just turned around and walked away. Um, so, I mean, we laugh because we know he's not God, but this is the position that Jesus is in. He's got to prove to people that he's God. And he is. And it's amazing that he's convinced all of us, because I'm standing here 2,000 years later believing that a man 2,000 years ago claimed to be God and, in fact, was. But what would we like God to do? This is an interesting question, because I think we're often in that position that the people in the gospel are in. We say, "Lord, why can't you just be more plain? Why can't you be more straightforward with me?" What would we like God to do to prove himself to us? Well, one thing people say is, it'd be nice if God just showed up in this room right now. Just showed up in his divinity. If we could just stand here and behold him. That would be nice. But what does that mean exactly? If God appeared in his divinity, not in any other form, but God appeared as God, what would he look like? Well, for one thing, we wouldn't be able to see him, because everything that we encounter with our senses. We are made of the world, and we are able to perceive things of the world, but God is not of the world. He is not a bodily being because he made the bodily beings. He made the universe. So God is a spiritual being. We don't even know what that means, but we know God would not be perceptible to our senses. So what God would have to do is take on a form that makes him visible, that makes him perceptible to our senses. And you know what? That's exactly what he did. God became man. He became a human being so that when we encounter the person of Jesus Christ, we encounter God. Well, what else would we want God to do? You know what would be really nice? What if God just gave us proof? What if he gave us proof of his existence? Well, God did do that. Many people don't know this. It is the teaching, the official teaching of the Catholic Church. This comes from Vatican I, the other Vatican Council that nobody talks about. It is the official teaching of the Catholic Church that you can prove God's existence. And this is so definitive, in fact, that when I was in seminary, one of my favorite professors stood in front of the class and said, "I have no faith in God's existence." He said, "I don't have faith in God's existence because you can't have faith in something that has been proven to you. And God's existence has been proven to me so many times that I can't have faith. It's self-evident to me." And nothing about that was heresy. That's true. God's existence can be proved and has been proved many, many times. Thomas Aquinas proved God's existence 5 times. St. Anselm proved it twice with the ontological argument and the argument from existence. St. Cardinal Newman proved it at least once with the argument from conscience. There's a new guy, a priest named Father Robert Spitzer, who has 2 books full of proofs for God's existence. We have plenty of proofs. And I can stand here today and say the same thing that my professor said. I really can't have faith in God's existence because it's too obvious to me. But why isn't it obvious to everyone? Well, most of us prefer our proof to come from the scientific method. But there's a problem with that. You can't prove God's existence with the scientific method for a reason that I already explained. The scientific method is based off of observation, and we cannot observe God. We can observe things in the universe, but we can't observe things outside of the universe. And God is outside of the universe. So you can't use science to do it. You have to use another method which is much more reliable. We have to use philosophy. And that's what Aquinas and Newman and Spitzer and Anselm, that's what they all did. They used philosophy. All right, so can you prove it to God? Can you prove your existence for us? Yes, well, I did that. I did that many, many times. So we can't accuse God of that. Why don't you do more miracles for us, Lord? Why can't you just do miracles? Surely everybody would believe with miracles. Well, guess what? Once again, God does do miracles. He does plenty of miracles. He's done plenty of miracles in this community that we're aware of. There are places in Africa where you can't say the liturgy without somebody being miraculously healed from something. And the more faith we have, the more miracles we see. Yeah, but what about the most important miracle, Lord? Why couldn't you save my loved ones from death? That's what I really want you to do. Well, guess what? He did that too. Not a single person has died without a hope for resurrection that was given to us by none other than Jesus Christ. God has done everything he can possibly do to reveal his presence to us, to prove his presence through logic, through miracles, through his own testimony, and through the testimony of others. If we don't find enough God in our life, it's not because he hasn't done enough. It's because we haven't responded enough. God is not holding himself back. He's not preventing himself from being available to us. If we search for God, we will find him. And if we want more God in our life, we will have that if we pursue him. The Lord is not trying to hide. That's actually the last thing that he wants to do. He wants to be present and clear in every moment of our lives. And all we have to do is respond.